has the open shot. And it is like that, like NBA basketball. And now, ladies and gentlemen of Honolulu, put those hands together. Lead tonight's starting five for your Sacramento Kings.
You are locked into the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast, frontline coverage of the Sacramento Kings. Now, here are your hosts, Jonathan Santiago and James Ham.
Welcome to the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast. I'm Jonathan Santiago. With me is James Ham. And this week, we've got a man who's dialed in to all things Isaiah Thomas. You know him, Aaron Bruski, Pro Basketball Talk. And obviously, as I mentioned, Isaiah Thomas is going to be the main topic of conversation today with, of course, a dash of Darren Collison, the Kings signing Darren Collison to a 3-year deal earlier today. And we'll discuss all things Isaiah and Darren Collison and the Sacramento Kings today with Aaron Bruski. Thanks for joining us today, man.
No problem, guys. How's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
It's going, man. Yeah.
I think we're kind of like everyone else here. We're pretty befuddled and confused with the Darren Collison signing. You know, I think after the initial shock of it wears off, then you start to think, at least from my end, you start to think, okay, let's wait and see what they do next. Because I don't think you can really judge the Darren Collison signing until you see what they do with Isaiah Thomas or if they have another move under their sleeve. That's just my opinion. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I don't know if you got a chance to see my tweet earlier today. I got a league source that said that the chances of Isaiah playing with the Kings next year are close to zero. So,
really,
I think it's pretty clear that the where this is heading. I mean, there's a lot of facets I'm sure we're going to get into, but I think the ship has sailed. I don't know what you guys are hearing from your sources, but this has been, I think, 3 years in the making. Since he's been here, he's never really been appreciated as a player. We're looking at, I think the culmination of an organization that didn't believe in Isaiah Thomas. And, you see that today when a journeyman in Darren Collison, who really, had a good playoff, great for his role with the team, with the Clippers. He played well in the playoffs, but this is a guy that was run out of Dallas, run out of Indy. He put up some numbers for the Hornets the
Pelicans.
They were the Hornets at the time. So.
They were.
He put up numbers when Chris Paul got hurt, and ever since he's really struggled. So replacing Isaiah Thomas with a player of that caliber, when, as you guys are noting in your articles that I read all the time, that the Kings could have made room to sign Isaiah Thomas, they used their mid-level exception on Collison and effectively close off that discussion. Nothing's official yet. Maybe some things could change, but just from what I'm hearing, it's just a long shot.
Yeah, Aaron, they do have cap space. They can clear up room, and they can actually still sign Isaiah Thomas. I just think that I'm really confused with what happened here. Unless we don't know that Isaiah is going to get like a monstrous offer from somebody. But $8 million a year of Isaiah Thomas is worth a lot more than $5 million a year of Darren Collison. I don't think anyone's going out on a limb to say that. But are you hearing anything other than roughly 3 years, $24 million, or has this gone up? Is he like? Are we looking at a 4-year, $48 million deal for Isaiah Thomas?
Well, put it this way: three for 24. That was before Jody Meeks broke the bank in Detroit, and that's actually not going to impact their ability to re-sign Isaiah, or probably sign Isaiah if they choose to get him. So, I mean, the market just went way up. I don't know if that's what Pete's thinking, but right now I've heard $6 and $7 million per year for these title contending teams like the Mavs, like the Heat. In that ballpark is what people are hearing. So, I mean, the market is there for Isaiah Thomas, and I think this is a situation where Kings management, the powers that be, just really missed on the evaluation of Isaiah Thomas and what he was worth Because if you're going to pay Darren Collison that much, what's a couple extra million to retain the face of your franchise, the guy that was showing up to city council meetings, the guy that did everything right, and I think you saw it on Twitter today and in the various chat rooms, etc. People are upset about this, so I think they missed on their evaluation. I hear that the front office is split on this. I think, I'm just speculating here. I think Mike Malone really likes Isaiah and wishes that he could stick around. So, I mean, it's a really interesting conversation. But, as far as his market goes, as soon as Carmelo Anthony's decision gets made, I think we're going to see some movement here.
Yeah, Aaron, how do you think, we talk about the Jody Meeks deal, Avery Bradley gets,
4 year, $32 million.
4 years, $32 million. Kyle Lowry gets the 4 years, $48 million from the Toronto Raptors. You got to think that Lowry is, of course, the ceiling there for Isaiah, and then Bradley would probably be the absolute, or Jody Meeks would be the absolute minimum. I mean, if he's coming in at around $7 to $8 million starting salary this year, the Kings have the room. They can make the room to re-sign him, as James alluded to. We've talked about it. I wrote about it a couple days ago. James alluded to it. They can use the stretch provision on Jason Terry. They can use the stretch provision on Derek Williams or Travis Outlaw. Those guys seem like the likeliest three candidates for them to use that on, because they have 1 year deals. And, if you use it on just Travis Outlaw and Jason Terry, you're looking at an additional $9.3 million under the luxury tax level with Darren Collison in the mix, assuming that he got the full mid-level exemption from the Sacramento Kings. But at the same time, I mean, even if they were to re-sign him here, even if he signed a deal with another team and the Kings decided to match an offer sheet, I could see them trying to typecast Isaiah once again in the super six-man role behind Darren Collison, and I wonder how he would take that, because he's been through that before with Gravis when he was obviously better than Vasquez last year coming into the season.
I just don't see it happening. I think for whatever reason, this decision on Isaiah was made maybe even years ago, as soon as the new management came in, and, when Pete D'Alessandro came in, he wanted to put his impact, he wanted to put his stamp on the team. And I think when he went out and got Gravis Vasquez, I think that, perhaps he, whatever reason, he completely sold himself that Isaiah wasn't going to be that player to take them to the next level. So all you've heard since, this ever became an issue is stories out of the Sacramento Bee and other places that the Kings are looking for another point guard. They're not happy with Isaiah as a starter. The market's $4 to $6 million. I mean, if you're Isaiah Thomas reading this stuff and, management's not saying, hey, no, this isn't right. We actually value Isaiah. We want to keep him around. We want to have, we want to have a long future with him. There was never any sort of I guess they didn't ever put a premium on the relationship with Isaiah. So, I don't think that perhaps there's time for either Pete D'Alessandro to say, maybe we really do value this guy. Perhaps there's time for Isaiah Thomas, if I'm Isaiah Thomas right now and I'm sitting at home, I probably feel like, what the heck is going on? What more do I have to give to Sacramento?
His Twitter avatar is black right now.
Yeah. I kind of feel like the trap has been sprung. That's what I mean. You have to look at this and say, look, if a contender team is going to fly in, if the Miami Heat, who are going to play for another championship unless all kinds of things fall apart here in the next few days, if they're going to play for a championship and they're willing to have Isaiah Thomas be their starting point guard, and you're the Sacramento Kings and you're looking at that, then honestly, you don't know how to evaluate talent. If he can start for the Miami Heat, who will be playing for a championship, but he can't start for you, then you really have no idea what exactly you're looking at. And so I kind of get the feeling like the $4 to $6 million, whatever it was, we're not going to go above this. We've heard that. The Kings are like, well, we've heard quietly, we're not going to go above $5 million to sign him. I kind of feel like they want someone to go, okay, well then if we can get him for $8 million a year, if I'm the Detroit Pistons and I can get him for the 3-year 24, regardless of what these other guys signed for, because look, the market for guys like Jody Meeks and that stuff, there's only a handful of teams that are stupid enough to jump in and do something like that. We've seen it a couple of times already, but there's not like 15 teams that are stupid enough to go out and sign a guy who has overinflated stats on a horrible LA Laker team with an offensive-minded coach and somehow scored what he scored last year. So when you look at it realistically, you're hoping that he signs one of these deals for a mid-level exemption for a playoff team. And then the Kings go, all right, you know what, the whole time we were just messing with you. We wanted to keep you, but we wanted to keep you at a decent deal so we could stay under the luxury tax. And here we're going to match. And, you know, it's either that or the Kings are going to try to do a sign and trade with a team that tries to do that. And that's the only deal. I mean, again, if Detroit pays him $8 million, the Kings say he's not worth $8 million, they're going to let him walk. I still see the Kings coming to them and saying, well, let's see if we can work out a Josh Smith trade. You know, I still see that there is some movement here. It's a team like the Lakers, or it's a team like Dallas, if they strike out with a bunch of people, they come in and just pay him way too much, and that's it. I mean, again, Detroit can't go above $8 million. Yeah. People aren't looking at that. With Greg Monroe eating up, they has a salary cap hold of over $10 million. They can't go above $8 million after the Jody Meeks deal. So, I mean, there's not that much money to go around, it doesn't seem like, unless one of these big teams literally just jumps in and throws everything at Isaiah.
Well, what's going to happen is some of these teams are going to strike out, you know, that are running around chasing LeBron, chasing Carmelo. You know, there's going to be a loser in that race. You know, probably, I didn't even mention them in the beginning. I think perhaps the leader in the clubhouse to get Isaiah Thomas's services is the Lakers. You know, they're going to have a ton of cap space. I've been hearing that 8 isn't necessarily his ceiling. But the most, I think, important point is Darren Collison was quoted as Pete telling him that he would have the keys to the franchise. Or the Kings, I should say. It would probably be Pete telling him that he would be given the keys to run the car.
Until he's not, though. I mean, that's what you tell somebody when you want to get them to sign a contract.
But you know what else, too? Right? You know, we're talking about mid-level exemption deals here, and you look at the guys who also just signed mid-level exemptions. I think Chris Kaman got close to the MLE from Portland, a little bit under, one only for 2 years. You look at Sean Livingston. Darren Collison got it, and he's a backup. And that's why I still kind of say, I want to wait and see what they do, because it seems like at this point you can't sign a starter. You cannot sign a starter at any position with the mid-level exemption, at least this offseason.
No. I think that, but here's the thing. I think with Isaiah and Pete, you know, right now, as far as the sign-in trade goes, I don't see who, Isaiah's camp bending over backwards to try to facilitate a sign and trade. And I don't think other teams are going to look at the Kings and say, well, you know, I think other teams are going to look at the Kings and say they have no leverage. They're going to say, you obviously don't want to bring Isaiah back for whatever the offer will be. Say it's worst case scenario 6. You know, say it's all the way up to 8 or 9. I don't think they're going to think the Kings are going to, you know, want to match that. So they're not going to work very hard on a sign and trade. Josh Smith, I mean, yeah, that's a really bad contract, but he still commands, you know, decent respect around the league. And I don't know that Van Gundy wants to get rid of him, you know, in that type of a deal. I don't know that the Kings are going to get anything back here, but I also don't think Pete necessarily, you know, this is just me speculating, but I don't know that he wants that type of circus around at the point guard position with Isaiah being slotted into a super sub role that he clearly doesn't want to play. You know, we'll go through it for a third consecutive year, almost a fourth consecutive year with, you know, kind of turmoil at the point guard position and, you know, lack of continuity. Whoever it is, the Kings got to just kind of pick up and go. I think at the end of the day, you know, you're looking at what you guys have there, or you got Darren Collison as your starting point guard and Ray Mack as kind of the, you know, the hopeful point guard of the future. And, you know, it's a gamble. I don't know that what I'm seeing a lot of Kings fans are happy with.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Kings fans, I think the reason why we haven't seen the complete outpouring and the sky is falling mentality from Sacramento Kings fans is because they still have a glimmer of hope. Once that glimmer of hope is extinguished, all gloves are off. And here's the problem, besides the fact that I do like Isaiah Thomas as a player, here's the other problem that the Sacramento Kings have. They're like the most unmarketable team ever. They don't have people on their roster that anyone is drawn to. I mean, you look back, even like local television, the only guy who gets a local television deal for commercials is the pizza guy, is Isaiah Thomas. He's the only guy that anyone seems to glob onto. I mean, Jason Thompson is a good guy. He's a good community guy. But in the end, you know, he does complain too much. Most people know that he's on his way out. I don't even think we need to touch the DeMarcus Cousins situation. We just know he's not marketable. Let's just be honest, he's not marketable. Rudy Gay is a pro's pro, but he doesn't open his mouth and talk. And you know, so again, it's like, how do you connect this team to the public? And how do you do it without Isaiah Thomas? Because once you lose Isaiah Thomas, it's like, how do you sell this team? How do you do it?
Yeah, and I get your point there, and you know, you wrote about that in the piece that you published later this evening or late this evening. But it's much like the same situation with Jimmer, right? I mean, he's such a marketable guy to a particular audience, and they made a decision, obviously, because he was just not, you know, a guy who could help them basketball wise to play him. So
but
this situation is different in that Isaiah Thomas can play, and that he is, you know, we all agree and we believe that he is a starting caliber point guard in this league. He's proven it. You know, he's come from the 60th pick in the draft to now being a guy who could potentially start on the Miami Heat, could potentially start next to Kobe Bryant for the Los Angeles Lakers. So, you know, it's...
And the other thing is, it's twofold here. There's one thing about Isaiah Thomas that you guys know. You know, we covered the arena saga side by side there for 3 years. I mean, this is a guy that was front and center at city council meetings, doing the team leader thing, speaking, you know, after games, kind of taking on that role. He's even from, you know, next door to Seattle and Tacoma. He never let that bias kind of creep into the way he approached that situation. He just went to India, you know, to represent the Kings. And, you know, so this is a guy that off the court, and speaking to the marketability as the only guy that's marketable, I mean, he's a guy fans can relate to, kids can relate to. I mean, from that perspective alone, all you've ever heard for the last 3 years coming out of the Sacramento Bees columns is, you know, everything bad about the player that doesn't even actually apply, that, you know, he does all these bad things, he can't play defense, all this stuff that really isn't true. That's one thing going on here. So that's going to be, I think, kind of held against the team in that regard. But on the court, this is a money ball basketball player. When you can lock up your starting point guard position for $8 to $9 million, that's a win.
That's reasonable.
That's a win.
It's a no-brainer. I totally agree.
I mean, when you look at a guy like Kyrie Irving, who just got a max extension for $90 million and has done nothing in Cleveland. He's been an all-star. He's, you know, part of the USA basketball men's senior team roster, but
he's an all-star in the East.
He's all-star in the East, but you look at, you know, we've said it. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. Look at the performance. Look at them head-to-head when they played against each other. I mean, it's not like Kyrie Irving is dominating Isaiah Thomas in that matchup. And Kyrie gets $90 million, averaging 20 points and 6 assists. And here's Isaiah Thomas averaging 20 points and 6 assists. And you could get him for possibly, you know, 32 million. Like, I would sign Isaiah to the deal. If you got Isaiah Thomas to the deal that Avery Bradley just signed, that is a steal, in my opinion.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so I look at this as a pivotal. I think I tweeted this this is a pivotal moment for Pete D'Alessandro. I do think he's kind of isolated on this decision. I don't know, you know, that for a fact. It's just the sense that I get talking with people. He's going to be looking at a team run by Darren Collison, Ray McCallum, Rudy Gay, I think you almost had to sign Rudy just to kind of keep the credibility of the franchise heading in the right direction. I wouldn't have lost any sleep for you guys if he had passed and opted out and he wasn't with the team anymore. It's kind of a neutral situation. DeMarcus Cousins, he's going to be one of the best big men, if not the best big man in the league. But where do you go from there? Where are you filling? Say Stauskas doesn't work out. I like Stauskas' pick. I think he'll do fine. But, where do you go if 1 to 2 guys don't work out? They're still kind of up against the cap right now. And it sounds like they want to re-sign Rudy and kind of take that core in the future. And that core, I don't know if they're getting out of 10th or 11th place.
No, even if you look at, James, you bring up the idea of them maybe targeting a sign and trade with Detroit to get Josh Smith here. I mean, if you have a lineup of Darren Collison, Nick Stauskas, Rudy Gay, Josh Smith, and DeMarcus Cousins, that's not a playoff team in the Western Conference. That's a team that probably, might win 35 games, maybe 40 games, but 35 to 40 isn't good enough in the Western Conference because 47 wasn't good enough in the Western Conference to even get the 8th seed. So
I think what the Kings are going to tell you, though, is like, look, why is everyone so upset over a point guard on a 28-win team that clearly wasn't able to get it done? That's what they're going to say. They're going to say, look,
but you could easily counter. You could easily counter and say, well, why did you want to convince a guy on a 28-win team to opt in for $19 million?
I totally agree.
Why did you sign a guy to a $62 million extension for 4 years when he hasn't won it all? And it's like you can't keep pointing to, well, he's 5'9". That's one weakness that he has, but there are so many other strengths that he brings to the table that you take what you got. Like, he's 5'9", but he does this, he does that, he also does this. I mean, it outweighs that one negative. Is him being 5'9" really that bad of a thing for him as a point guard in the NBA? Because he's proven that it's not. He has.
Go ahead.
And the other thing I would like to point out is he's 5'9", but he weighs 180, and Darren Collison is 6 foot tall, so he's got 3 inches on him, and he weighs 160.
Right.
I mean, you're looking at a dude who's built like a Mack truck. I mean, he can play 35 minutes a game.
Well, he blocks people at the rim.
Well, hey, he plays defense. In the post, he plays solid defense. Did he have a great defensive year? No. But let's be honest. Isaiah Thomas was in a contract year. He was trying to score as many points as possible, just like Rudy Gay was trying to do his best to get paid as much as possible. And I don't fault.
Well, not to mention playing 36, 38 minutes a game, sometimes more. So I would say he was probably taking a breather on a lot of those plays.
And again, I think if you have him, you bring him back, if they did bring him back, he would still have to make adjustments to his game. I mean, we're at a point where, okay, dude, we know you can score 20 a night. That's okay, but we don't need you to do that. We don't necessarily need you averaging 8 to 10 assists a game either, but can you make the extra pass that leads to another pass that leads to an open shot? Can you do that?
You know what's interesting, though? In that squad last year, they only had 3 guys that could score. I mean, give or take, here or there, but they had 5 guys in the paint, every time down the floor. When you play Ben McLemore and he can't shoot, and when you play a power forward position, when you're either playing Reggie Evans, Quincy Acey, or Jason Thompson, defenses practically don't guard those guys. I don't get as hot and bothered about the not passing thing when he's averaging 6 assists a game and, probably would average 7 or 8 if DeMarcus Cousins didn't, pump fake 10 times before burying the jumper, things like that.
Or if he had a shooting guard that could actually hit an outside shot. I mean, Marcus Thornton was so horrible to start this season. I mean, we talked about it so many times. The Kings played 4-on-5. And again, I'll even say this. If you've got Isaiah Thomas, you've got Rudy Gay, and you've got DeMarcus Cousins, you don't lose one of those guys if you can afford to. You build the other 2 positions up. You add Stauskas And then you add someone at the power forward position. However you got to do it, you got to trade, you got to sign a guy that's young that may end up working out. However it is, you got to figure it out. A guy like Ed Davis, you take a gamble and see if you can get out of him what you need, and then you build more next year. But what you don't do is you don't walk away from one of the three pieces. I just, again, I don't see it.
You know, I think this is I think it's kind of blind. It's not blindsiding us because we're in the business and we talk about this every day and this is our job. I think it's blindsiding folks because you only have a few media voices in Sacramento. And as much as we live online, I don't think a lot of people necessarily, comparatively get their news kind of like online consistently. I think that they're going to primarily read the big outlets like the Sacramento Bee. They're going to listen to KHTK. I think there's been this media narrative surrounding Isaiah Thomas that nobody else in the country buys into. The only people that buy into it are really kind of just the people getting a glimpse of this here and there. They're not watching the games every night. And the rest of the country, and we're seeing this as it bears out in the marketplace, they really appreciate Isaiah. And I think the tweets that were going around nationally are like, what are the Kings doing here? So I think locally, everybody's just kind of shocked that the market's not 4 to 6 million like the papers have been saying for the last few weeks. I think that they're just shocked that he's getting yanked away from them. It's really sudden. I don't. And one last thing on the way that this all went down. I think Pete really wanted Sean Livingston. I think that they were looking at some of these other point guards, and when Livingston went, I think that they said, you know what, we're not going to keep Isaiah. We got to get somebody quick, and bam.
See, the peculiar thing about the Darren Collison signing, I'm sure you guys have had it. There have been some fans who've hit me up on Twitter and say, well, he might be a better fit for what they try to do because, Isaiah's a score-first point guard. I think Darren Collins is more of a pass-first type, and that's completely wrong.
Right.
He's a guy who historically throughout his career has been a scorer-first point guard. He might be a little bit of an upgrade defensively over Isaiah, but I mean, he's not, he's not, he isn't Grievous Vasquez. Vasquez is a passer. I mean, this guy again is a guy who is going to basically try to look for his shot first and then pass later. So to me, I don't necessarily feel like, again, if you're signing him to be your starting point guard, I have an issue. If you're signing him to be your backup point guard, looks great. Like if Rajon Rondo is still a possibility for this team, I love Darren Collison as their backup point guard. But if you have Isaiah coming back, I can see it where Darren Collison starts and you have Isaiah coming off the bench, but you essentially play Isaiah's starter minutes like a Manu Ginobili type. But again, if you're signing Darren Collison and saying, this guy's our starting point guard and we're going to go with him and Ray McCallum, you're not going to improve next season, or there are going to be a lot of questions about whether you improve.
Here's the thing about Collison. So when he was playing in with the Clippers, you got Chris Paul there. He was basically a shooting guard. He would run the offense for the 12 minutes that Chris Paul wasn't on the floor, or however many. But when he started playing 20, 25 minutes a game, he was splitting time at both positions. When he was successful in New Orleans, he was a pick and roll basketball player, and they ran that pick and roll almost every time down the floor, him and David West. These guys, so he's very comfortable in that. I don't know that the Kings are going to do that, give him the keys literally and say, be our playmaker out of the pick and roll. When he was in Dallas and when he was in Indy, they didn't run the pick and roll. He basically was kind of like a point guard by name only. And he really, really struggled. During Indy, his production was way down. But when he was in Dallas, things got really bad. I mean, Rick Carlisle could barely even say his name in press conferences. I mean, he was that
Mike
done.
James took his starting job at the end of the season.
Yes.
Is Mike James still in the league, guys? I don't know.
But keep in mind,
he's
it was
like 37. He comes back every year.
Yeah, he's kind of amazing. But it was for defensive reasons. Keep that in mind. I mean, so not only was the offensive production not there, but he was, for defensive reasons, benched for Mike James. So it's just, I think he had a good comeback. I think, he obviously has a comfort level playing next to Chris Paul for whatever reason. Perhaps that's the pick and roll elements kind of reestablishing themselves. But geez, kind of a head scratcher there if you're a Kings fan today.
Is that what they see, you think? I mean, you mentioned it there. I found that interesting that you point out, because I was going to ask you that, and then you dove into it, Aaron, about his success in New Orleans, because I was looking at his numbers. I have a piece that's teed up probably for Saturday on, why has this guy bounced around? Because I liked him when he was a rookie. He was really solid his rookie year. Him and Marcus Thornton were fantastic for the New Orleans Hornets that year, with Chris Paul dealing with a lot of injury. And, I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of the games started that year for the New Orleans Hornets, but I do remember that as a starter, he did average something like 18 and 9 assists a game, and he was really impressive there. And I find that interesting. Maybe that is why the Kings say, okay, we can get this guy at a value, and in our system, running the pick and roll with DeMarcus Cousins, he can go back to the form he was in New Orleans. But it was such a long time ago. I mean, we're looking at five years before, and there are, there are questions about whether I think he can stay healthy as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind during that season that he really tore it up, those games were not very competitive. Marcus Thornton, you guys are really familiar with Marcus Thornton. I mean, he was running around jacking up shots like it was nobody's business. Obviously, Indy was not happy with what they purchased after that big season. I think he's improved. I mean, obviously, being in the league will do that. I think he had a really good season for the Clippers last year in his backup role. But, we'll go in a circle again. If he's a starting point guard for the Kings, where do you go from there?
They just want a bunch of UCLA guys.
Yeah,
they just want Luke Bamute. It's just now they're going to go after Kevin Love again. This is their way to convince Kevin Love to stay in Sacramento. We got your point guard from your national championship. You're in a Final Four team in college. Maybe they should go after Russell Westbrook instead.
Yeah.
My question for you guys is, where do the Kings go from here, though? Because the writing's on the wall. I don't really think a sign-in trade is going to be
I don't know.
Earth-shattering. But let's just assume for a second that there is no sign-in trade that changes the game for the Kings. Where do you go from here? How do you address the power forward position?
I mean, they have chips. They talk about Ben McLemore being a part of their future, but I mean, honestly, I can't. That's why the backcourt still has just so many questions. You've got, even though you have Darren Collison, who's a 5-year veteran, you've got 3 other guys who have 1 year or no years of experience in the NBA. And, I think the Kings are very high on Nick Stauskas. I mean, I think they believe that he is NBA ready. But at the same time, we haven't seen it yet. Until he plays a significant amount of games in the NBA, honestly, I just wouldn't be, too comfortable with running, him and Ben out there as your 2 guards in rotation. But you have Ben McLemore as a potential chip, but what value does he have on the open market? Because I think they did try to move him last week in the draft, and they probably found out that maybe his value is, they don't, like, the rest of the league might not value him as much as the Kings do.
Well, I'm told Boston viewed the sign and trade possibility with Sacramento and Rondo kind of as a backup offer if they couldn't do better down the road somewhere. And I don't even know how high they were on that offer. So I think now that you've seen Avery Bradley get signed, and I think with the just kind of the way that this has developed a little bit, I don't think that that's quite the option that it looked like it would be about 2 to 3 days ago. So again, it kind of probably comes back to the fact that McLemore on his own is not necessarily, it's not pulling in the trade offers, put it that way.
Yeah, I can't imagine that Ben McLemore is pulling in massive trade offers. And I also, I look at Ben and, he's still very young. But at the same time, let's be honest, if he sits on the bench for a year, he has no value. Yeah. He has no value.
His value, I think, even drops dramatically and precipitously if he's sitting on the bench.
Yeah. I mean, his value is right now, they have to trade him now. They have no options. You can't have two young shooting guards, one who's 21 and one who's 20. Start the kid who's 20, who just came out of the Big Ten, and just say, oh, well, he's just not ready yet. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And again, the Kings need a veteran at that position. They don't need two kids pushing each other, that whole junk. I mean, I would love to see Collison and Thomas fight it out for the starting job in training camp, because I think we all know who would win. And I think they could play alongside each other a little bit, because we did see that a little bit with the Clippers and Chris Paul and Collison. But at the end of the day, I'm confused.
Yeah,
I mean, this team, it's a 25-win team. That's what it looks like right now. As of today, this is a 25-win team. And what does that mean? More than anything else, it means that Rudy Gay is taking the first plane out of town.
Right.
I mean, that's what Rudy Gay is like. Get me out of here.
I felt, I wrote a piece the other day. I wrote a piece that was published like maybe an hour before the news of Darren Collison signing with the Kings broke. And it's unfortunate because I had highlighted a couple players who I thought made sense for their mid-level exemption, and they go out and get Darren Collison, which is a surprise. I really would have liked to have seen Rodney Stuckey, in my opinion, because I think he fits. He's not. You look at them chasing Sean Livingston. I would have liked Sean Livingston here in Sacramento if he was your backup, 2-guard, 1-guard, much like what he's going to do in Golden State. I kind of envision, if they did go after Stuckey, him playing that type of role here in Golden State in Sacramento as a combo guard at the 1 and 2. I mean, there are other options out there who I think were a little bit better than Darren Collison for the mid-level exemption that they used. And it's just, again, like you said, James, it is confusing. I mean, and that's why I say, as much as I don't really like the deal right now, I grade them incomplete until I see what they do with Isaiah Thomas, and realistically what they do, entering training camp. But it's tough. It's just, it is confusing. It is very confusing.
Well, at least they released it right before 4th of July weekend.
Now we can go barbecue, actually. That's nice.
One interesting thing is, I wonder what they're going to do to kind of get, not around this, but to get out in front of it. How are they going to sell this to the fans? How are they going to sell their rationale? It's been quiet. Have you guys heard anything? I haven't heard anything today.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea how you can sell Darren Collison as a starting point guard.
Has Aileen written a column yet, comparing Isaiah Thomas to a trash can?
No, I'm not. By the way, greatest moment ever that we had to edit out of James's piece. He did a Q&A with IT after, what was it, before the draft lottery? And you were there with
before the draft lottery.
You were there with Aileen, and we like Aileen. She's a nice person. We deal with Aileen Voisin on a daily and weekly basis. It was just funny, but she's obviously critical of Isaiah Thomas, and she will not back off of that. She knows. And what was it that Isaiah said to you? I think you had asked him a question.
I asked him if he believed that he had done enough to prove himself as a starting point guard in the NBA. And he looked right at her and says, well, she doesn't think I have. and she like, no, it's not that I don't think you're a good player. I just don't think you're a star. And it's like, and then she threw it out there. And there's a lot of NBA executives who feel the same way. And he just, goes off on her for a minute, and it is what it is. I mean, look, the kid averaged 20.6 points.
Yeah, what else does he have to do?
Well,
does he need to hang off of? Does he have to hang off of like a what's that? Like hang on some monkey bars like 5 hours a day so that he can grow taller? I don't know, by 3 inches.
Yeah, again, his numbers are inflated. He did play a lot this season for the numbers, and I get that. The Kings, again, they're a team that played for themselves. You watched it all season long. They talked about it as soon as the season's over. We're selfish. There's all kinds of craziness that comes out of this team. I mean, we've all heard the stories about the selfishness that goes on behind the scenes. And the fact is that Isaiah Thomas was part of that. And so I don't want to give him a free pass and say, look, He's an NBA All-Star. I do think he's better than Kyrie Irving. People may say that I'm crazy for saying that, but look, that guy, I'm not sure why they gave him money, because they don't like him either. He's not a pleasant guy to be around. And Isaiah Thomas is. And another thing that really shocks me in this situation is that there's one player who can work with DeMarcus Cousins,
right?
Who can brush it all off, who can figure out the guy who's still buddies with him after working with him for 3 years. He's understanding that DeMarcus is going to be DeMarcus, but the fact is Isaiah Thomas is the guy. He's like your little brother and your big brother all in one for this team. And to me, that's a whole nother avenue on this deal that doesn't make sense. I mean, typically we don't spend an entire podcast talking
on one guy,
one transaction, one player, one everything else. And again, it's not like there aren't better players. There are better players in the league than Isaiah Thomas. I really like the way that he handles the media. I really like the way that he gets out with the fans. I really like watching him play. He plays with such inspiration, and there were so many games this season that literally were just over. The Kings were getting blasted by 20, and Isaiah catches fire and leads a charge back, and they're right back in it. Even if they didn't win all of those games, there were at least 5 or 6 games that were literally the Kings were so dead in the water and had no chance, and Isaiah threw the team on his back and carried them back into the game and actually won games. And now I'm looking at this like, does Darren Collison have that kind of, moxie? Does he have that, not just ability, but does he even have the want to do that? To take a bad team and say, hey, we're not going to lose this one. And that's something that Isaiah Thomas has. It's something he's always had. We watched it in college. We watch it at the pro level every step of the way. They try to replace him. He keeps storming back every time. And now, I mean, literally, this is how you replace him? By letting him walk out the door for a couple of $1 million that over what you're going to pay someone else. All I got to say is, number one, we got to see how it plays out. Number two, if he's like an $8 million man, then I don't know how you recover from this as a franchise. I mean, at least like short term. How do you recover from this? Because you're not going to be as good as you were last year, and you were a 28-win team last year.
Yeah, and it's tough to sell. Again, you bring that up, Aaron. How would they sell this to the fans when, we're hearing from people within the organization that they will spend, that Vivek has given Pete D'Alessandro a blank check, and that he's not afraid to go over the luxury tax. But in certain situations, they have to be cautious, and it's tough. I mean, you can't. Again, you let this guy walk, and if he signs, $8 million a year annually, and you let him walk, that I don't know how you're a better basketball team coming into this season unless you have other moves teed up.
And I'll point this out too, not to interrupt there really quick. The Kings have $17 million in literally tertiary players falling off the books for next season, for next offseason. So while they're up against the cap today and the luxury tax, Jason Terry, Derek Williams, Reggie Evans, and Travis Outlaw all come off the books. And if Rudy Gay is part of that as well, $36 million comes off the books for next year. So you can't say it's long-term stability. Again, we've talked about this, John, a million times. Jamal Crawford, Jason Terry, 2 players. Even if Isaiah Thomas is just a Super Six, even if that's what he is, those guys as Super Six in their heyday made $10 to $12 million a year. That's what they made. And if you're going to balk at Isaiah Thomas, who would play that same role or possibly even be a starter, and you're not going to pay him 8, then again, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think that Pete, this is my sense, he's really isolated on this. I think it's been about 12 hours, now that we're recording here tonight. It's been about 12 hours since we've heard, and we haven't heard anything. I don't know if we'll hear anything over the weekend. I would presume there will be a few pieces out of the Sacramento Bee talking about what a great move this is. Who knows?
You're playing hardball with the B now, aren't you, Aaron?
But hey, I
while on the Cowbell Kingdom podcast. So instead
I wonder though. Say this, say the team moves to Seattle, and these folks, what are they going to be writing about? If there's no Sacramento Kings, and this is a guy in Isaiah Thomas that went to city council meetings, put a good face on a really, really bad organization underneath the Maloofs, and sold it to the Sacramento public. And all you've heard out of that newspaper, and really, outside of Coach Malone, who I think really likes Isaiah, and I think, ownership really likes Isaiah, you haven't heard a whole lot of positivity about this guy. And that's a bigger storyline than I think people know right now is the relationship between the parties. And I don't think at this point, Isaiah, barring a few key significant changes, I don't think he would probably want to play for Sacramento at this rate. So, with all that being said,
he doesn't have a choice, though.
He doesn't have a choice, but, are you going to, if you're Pete and you already don't want to pay $4 to $6 million for this guy, are you going to pay $8 to $9 million for a potentially unhappy Isaiah Thomas? I mean, I know he's going to come in and be a professional about it, but the battle at point guard between Gravis Vasquez and Isaiah Thomas, and the battle between Isaiah Thomas and Aaron Brooks, basically wasted 2 years of development for the kid. So, I mean, you got to have continuity at that position. You've got to have an identity out of that position. You've got to be able to move people on the floor. It's like a running back in football back in the day when he had 30 carries in a game. He got to get a feel for the game. You got to have a feel for the game out of that position. You can't have a platoon.
All right, to close things out here on the Cowbell Kingdom podcast, the Isaiah Thomas edition.
Isaiah Thomas edition.
This podcast is brought to you. This podcast is not brought to you by a pizza company out here in Sacramento. It's brought to you by nobody today. But what's his ceiling? What do you think, Aaron? And you can even throw James. You can also weigh in on this as well. But what do you think is the maximum starting salary? Because that's what I'm more concerned about. For luxury tax purposes for the Sacramento Kings this year. What do you think? What do you think his starting salary? The max, what do you think that'll be, in terms of an offer sheet here in the coming days?
For Isaiah?
For Isaiah.
The max, I think probably 9. I mean, maybe somebody surprises me. And there was a couple writers that I respect that said that, Nate Duncan, I believe, of Basketball Insiders, thought that he could go north of 10. I wouldn't be surprised. I would pay 10. That's my personal, feelings on what he could be paid.
I would pay him 10 too.
I think his match though, I really think that keep an eye. I think if he's going to get a big offer sheet, it'll probably come from the Lakers. They've got the money, they got the cap room. It's a great story to tell, and he'll fit in real well there. But I think another team to keep an eye on would be the Mavs, and I don't know that they're going to be the team that's going to just drop the big offer, but I know that they definitely want to upgrade their point guard position over Raymond Felton. They're probably, my sense is, not going to get Carmelo Anthony, and that's going to leave them looking to upgrade that position with a decent amount of money. So I would say $7 to $8 million out of the Mavs, perhaps, if they really zero in on Isaiah and say this is going to be the guy.
That's just shocking to me. I'm in shock. I shouldn't still be in shock because I've watched this franchise for the last 4 years. But if the Sacramento Kings allow Isaiah Thomas to get away on an $8 million contract, then I literally don't know what to say. This team is strapped for talent. They have a major issue with not enough talent. And this kid has talent. And if you let him walk out the door, I mean, if we're talking, I think $10 million, $10 million is north of what I would pay. But if it's 7 or 8, I'm just shocked. I don't care about the sign and trade, any of that stuff. You're giving up too good of a kid. And look, I'll say this honestly. I think you talk about his financial ceiling. I think Isaiah Thomas has hit his ceiling as a player. I think that he gives you everything that he's got, and what he's got in his best year is 20.3 points and 6.8 or 6.3 assists. He may be able to up that assist number and get into the sevens, but he's more like an 18 and 7 guy. And that's still, it's worth what you're looking at. It's worth it. It's not my money and it's not my team, but it's worth it because you're not going to find anyone else on the open market that can do the things that he does and pay him that amount of money. And I mean, that's the reality. And this team has a lot of holes. You're creating another hole because Darren Collison certainly doesn't fill the gap that Isaiah Thomas is about to leave. And you're not going to get 5 more points out of DeMarcus Cousins and 5 more points out of Rudy Gay and enough out of Nick Stauskas to make up for what you've lost. And I mean, it's tough. But for one season, you got to pay the luxury if that's what you got to do. For one season, you got to bite the bullet, and you need to add to this team, not subtract.
All right, on that note, let's wrap up this edition of the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast. Aaron, thank you for joining us as always. You can follow Aaron on Twitter, twitter.com/Aaron Bruski. Find his work on Pro Basketball Talk, NBC Sports, all that good stuff there. So for James Ham, I'm Jonathan Santiago. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast.